Welcome back to my channel. I'm Brittany, and this is my archive of curiosity. I like my mysteries twisty, my characters complicated, and my truths, well, let's just say I like my truths served with a side of holy crap. I can't believe that actually happened. And when it comes to history, the truth can be wilder than any HBO drama. Ever been called a conspiracy theorist for questioning the official story? For suggesting that maybe, just maybe, those in power aren't always playing by the rules? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because today we're diving headfirst into the world of conspiracy theories that turned out to be not so theoretical after all. These are the stories that'll make you question everything you thought you knew. Get ready for government cover-ups, secret experiments, and lies so big they'd make even Madeline Martha Mackenzie blush. Let's spill the tea, shall we? Remember when the idea of Big Brother watching your every move was pure science fiction? When the thought of the government tapping your phone and reading your emails seemed like something out of a paranoid thriller? Yeah, those were the days. Turns out the truth was even creepier than fiction. In 2013, this guy Edward Snowden, a whistleblower with a capital W, dropped a bombshell that shook the world. The NSA, our very own national security agency, was secretly collecting phone records, emails, and online activity from millions of ordinary Americans. Yep, you heard that right, millions. And if you think that's shady, hold on to your hats, because it gets worse. Turns out major tech companies like Google and Facebook were in on it too. They called it the PRISM program. Catchy, right? Sounds almost patriotic. Except it involved these companies handing over your personal data to the government. All those late-night Google searches for, what does it mean when your ex likes your Instagram post from 3 years ago? Yeah, the government might have seen those. Awkward. Of course, the powers that be were quick to assure us that it was all for our own good. National security, they cried. Terrorism. But let's be honest. When the government tells you not to worry, that's exactly when you should start worrying. Okay, this next one is straight out of a nightmare. Imagine a world where the CIA is secretly experimenting on people, trying to control their minds with drugs, hypnosis, and all sorts of other messed up stuff. Sounds like a bad acid trip, right? Might be time to come back down to earth then, because it actually happened. From the 1950s to the 1970s, the CIA ran a top-secret program called MK Ultra. And let me tell you, the things they got up to would make your hair stand on end. We're talking LSD, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, and even good old-fashioned psychological torture. Basically, anything they could think of to try and crack the code of the human mind. And who were the lucky guinea pigs in this twisted experiment? Unsuspecting civilians, prisoners, and even their own agents. Imagine being drugged without your knowledge, subjected to horrific experiments, and then having your memories wiped clean. It's the stuff of nightmares, but for the victims of MK Ultra, it was all too real. And before you ask, no, it didn't end because the CIA suddenly grew a conscience. It ended because they got caught. Chapter 4. Operation Mockingbird. They planted what? Y'all, remember that time you read a news story and thought, well, that's a little too convenient? Turns out you might have been more right than you knew. Back in the good old days of the Cold War, the CIA wasn't just catching spies, they were crafting narratives. We're talking full-on fake news before it was trendy. They called it Operation Mockingbird, and honey, it was as shady as its name suggests. You would think the government could come up with better names, huh? Imagine journalists, those bastions of truth and integrity, secretly on the CIA payroll, sprinkling a little propaganda into your morning paper. It's enough to make you switch to decaf, I tell you. The CIA recruited journalists from big-time newspapers and even used them to influence other reporters. It was like a game of telephone, except instead of whispers, they were spreading government-approved information. Makes you wonder how much of what we read is actually, real. Now, the CIA claims they stopped this whole Mockingbird thing back in the 70s. But let's be honest, y'all, do we really believe everything the government tells us? I mean, they did try to tell us cigarettes were harmless for decades, but we'll get to that later. The point is, Operation Mockingbird shows how easily information can be manipulated. It makes you question everything you read and hear, especially when it comes from those in power. And in this day and age, with social media swirling with rumors and half-truths, It's more important than ever to be discerning. So the next time you're scrolling through your newsfeed or watching CNN, remember Operation Mockingbird. Ask yourself, who benefits from this story? Could there be another side to this? Because sometimes the truth is a lot more complicated than they want you to believe. And it takes more than just watching CNN or Fox News to figure this stuff out. Chapter 5. The FBI versus MLK talk about bad blood. Okay, y'all, we all know Martin Luther King Jr., right? Civil rights icon, gifted orator, dreamer of a better tomorrow. But did you know that while he was busy fighting for equality, the FBI was busy trying to destroy him? Now don't get it twisted. Thanks to recent revelations, we know MLK wasn't as innocent as he seemed. But Hoover was a straight-up hater. See, J. Edgar Hoover, the head honcho of the FBI, he wasn't exactly a fan of progress. He saw MLK as a threat, someone who was disrupting the status quo. So what did he do? He unleashed the FBI on him like a pack of bloodhounds. They tapped his phones, bugged his hotel rooms, even tried to dig up dirt on his personal life. It was all part of a shady little program called COINTELPRO, which basically gave the FBI free rein to spy on and discredit anyone they considered subversive. But the lowest blow of all? They sent MLK an anonymous letter. This wasn't your typical hate mail, though. This letter was pure evil, designed to break him, to make him doubt himself, to make him want to disappear. It threatened to expose his personal life, to paint him as a hypocrite, a fraud. Can you imagine the pressure, the anguish, the sheer cruelty of it all? Here was a man dedicating his life to fighting for justice, and the very people who were supposed to uphold the law were trying to break him. Years later, of course, we found out that everything happens for a reason, and King wasn't the pinnacle of sainthood after all. However, the egregious invasion of privacy definitely happened. The FBI's campaign against MLK was a betrayal of everything America is supposed to stand for. It's a dark chapter in our history, a reminder that even in the land of the free, the powerful will go to any lengths to silence those who dare to challenge them. Chapter 6: The Gulf of Tonkin Incident. Did someone say false flag? All right, history buffs, let's talk about the Gulf of Tonkin Incident. 1964, the height of the Cold War, tensions are high, and suddenly, bam! The U.S. government claims North Vietnamese torpedo boats attacked American destroyers. This attack became the justification for America's full-fledged involvement in the Vietnam War. Millions of lives were forever changed because of what happened, or should I say, what they told us happened in the Gulf of Tonkin. Now here's the kicker. It turns out the whole thing was about as staged as a high school play. Declassified documents, those sneaky little things, revealed that the incident was either wildly exaggerated or, get this, completely made up. So why would the government lie about something as serious as an act of war? Well, honey, sometimes the truth is just bad for business, especially when that business is bringing in a steady profit. And by business, I mean the business of war. See, the Vietnam War was already a controversial mess. The American public wasn't exactly lining up to send their sons and daughters to fight in some far-off jungle. But a direct attack on American ships? Well, that's a whole different story. The Gulf of Tonkin incident shows how easily governments can manipulate events to justify their actions. It's a reminder that we can't always trust what we're told, especially when it comes to matters of war and peace, because sometimes the truth is the first casualty in the fight for power. Y'all, remember those old cigarette commercials with doctors recommending their favorite brand? For an awful example, for a throat that feels as smooth as a baby's bottom, reach for a Lucky Strike. It all seems so ridiculous now, right? Well, for decades, Big Tobacco pushed this narrative that smoking wasn't just harmless, it was downright glamorous. They slapped images of handsome cowboys and sophisticated ladies on their packs, making it seem like cigarettes were the key to freedom and allure. Even in my childhood back in the 90s, I can remember how absolutely cool Joe Cool was. And candy cigarettes? Don't get me started. And we bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Meanwhile, behind those glossy advertisements and charming spokespeople, a much darker truth was swirling. Because while they were busy convincing us to light up, Big Tobacco was sitting on a mountain of their own research. Research that showed just how addictive and deadly their products really were. They knew cigarettes caused cancer, heart disease, emphysema, the whole shebang. But did they tell us? Bless your heart, honey, no. Instead, they chose profit over people. Surprise, freaking surprise. They chose to protect their bottom line, even if it meant sacrificing our health. They spent millions funding bogus studies, discrediting real science, and basically gaslighting an entire generation into thinking cigarettes were just a harmless indulgence. Now, you might be thinking, surely someone blew the whistle on this whole charade. And you'd be right. In the 1990s, a whole mess of internal documents got leaked, exposing Big Tobacco's little white lies for the whole world to see. Turns out, they knew all along. They knew about the nicotine addiction, the cancer, the whole 9 yards. These documents were like something out of a John Grisham thriller. Memos from executives, reports from their own scientists, all pointing to a massive conspiracy to deceive the public. It was a scandal of epic proportions. The lawsuits came in faster than you could say class action. And finally, after years of deception, Big Tobacco had to answer for their actions. They were forced to pay billions in settlements, admit they lied, and try to undo some of the damage they'd done. But the really tragic part? All those lives lost, all those families devastated by preventable illnesses, all because Big Tobacco chose greed over honesty. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most sinister conspiracies are hiding in plain sight, disguised as something as simple as a pack of cigarettes. Okay, y'all, get out a wine glass or your favorite beer to cheers to this one. Picture this. It's the roaring 20s, flapper dresses and jazz music are all the rage, and America has decided to outlaw alcohol. Prohibition was supposed to usher in a new era of sobriety and virtue. But people loved their cocktails. So, a thriving black market for booze popped up. The government decided to poison the alcohol supply. Thousands died from poisoning. It was a public health disaster. And that, my friends, is a chilling thought indeed. This next one is tough to talk about, but it's important. We're going to delve into one of the darkest chapters in American history, a story of racism, medical malpractice, and a shocking disregard for human life. It's called the Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment, and it's enough to make your blood run cold. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service conducted a study on syphilis using 600 black men from Macon County, Alabama, as unwitting subjects. These men were told they were being treated for bad blood, but were actually denied treatment to study the disease's progression. Even after penicillin became the standard cure, treatment was withheld. The study ended in 1972 after a whistleblower alerted the press. The Tuskegee syphilis study left an indelible stain on the American conscience, eroding trust in medical institutions. It's a story we must never forget. Naturally, they don't teach it in school, but the importance remains. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And now the Cold War. Talk about a time of paranoia and suspicion, right? But you know what's even scarier than the threat of nuclear war? The idea that your own government might be experimenting on you? And I ain't talking about some harmless little science project. During the Cold War, the US government decided it would be a grand idea to see what radiation does to people, like actual human beings. They injected people with plutonium, released radioactive clouds over towns. Can you even imagine? They treated their own citizens like lab rats, all in the name of national security. And when people started getting sick, well, accidents happen, right? Except these weren't accidents. This was official US policy. They knew the risks, they just didn't care. They thought they were above it all, that the ends justified the means. And you know what the worst part is? A lot of these folks didn't even know they were being experimented on. They were just living their lives, raising their families, and bam, suddenly they're glowing in the dark. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Who can you trust when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones putting you in harm's way? It's enough to make your skin crawl. All right, y'all, buckle up because this one's a doozy. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Talk about a close call, right? Well, it turns out things could have been a whole lot worse. In the early 60s, the Pentagon came up with a little plan called Operation Northwoods. And let me tell you, this wasn't some harmless prank war game. Their big idea? They were going to stage fake terrorist attacks on American soil, like hijacked planes, bombings, the whole 9 yards. They even considered faking casualties. And why would they do such a thing, you ask? Oh, just a little thing called starting a war with Cuba. They figured if they could convince the American people that Cuba was behind these attacks, they could swoop in and be the heroes. Can you even imagine the audacity? Thankfully, President Kennedy had the good sense to shut that whole thing down. But the fact that it even crossed their minds is just chilling. It makes you realize that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding under the bed. They're sitting in boardrooms, wearing suits and ties. So, what have we learned today, y'all? That sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. For years, people dismissed these stories as crazy conspiracy theories. But guess what? They turned out to be true. History has shown us time and time again that the powerful love to lie, cover up, and manipulate. And who knows what secrets are still lurking out there, just waiting to be uncovered. So the next time someone tells you something is just a conspiracy theory, don't be so quick to dismiss it. Do your own research, ask questions, and don't be afraid to challenge the official narrative. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite conspiracy that turned out to be true? And if you like this kind of content, make sure to like, subscribe, and share before this video mysteriously disappears. Stay curious, stay skeptical. See you next time.